I started the framework for a potentially new sculpture today. I've had this idea for about 5 or 6 years to make this very large, dramatic archer. As you can see, he's firing down and away. And I really like the fact that he's twisted back and it's just super swept back and very dramatic. I made this winged foot about 5 or 6 years ago, and ever since then I've wanted to make a winged foot sculpture. So you can kind of get the idea, even though it's not to proportion, but you can sort of imagine what it would look like in the end. So now that this frame is done, I can start just adding flesh and muscle where I think it should be. So now I can use this like a skeleton, and now all I have to do is imagine human anatomy and look at things like this useful tool and start building up flesh and muscle. And as I do it, I can just do it in sections and then re-add them to the whole framework. So this is supposed to be the idea. It's my take on Hermes, I guess you could say. Even though Hermes didn't have a bow, I think it would be really cool. And the idea is to have the sculpture being very raw metal, sort of like how this is, but the bow would be very large, polished, and incredibly refined, almost like a piece of jewelry, I guess you could call it. So that's the idea. We'll see if it comes to life. Here's a quick update on the archer and what I've done so far. Mostly I've mapped out landmarks for large areas of the body, so I know where things are supposed to be. For example, the top of the glutes are middle of the pelvis. The bottom of the glutes are about 3/4 of the way down from the thigh here, and then the back of the hamstring, the end of the hamstring is this one here. The quads extend lower, so you can see by my little reference guy, the quad extends lower than the hamstring does. So there's sort of this angle here, and you can kind of see that angle reflected there. And the quad will go all the way up to about here, and then there's hip flexors here in the pelvis, which I've marked out here as well. And then I got twisting 3/32 rods that I just kind of tack in place just to sort of make it easier for me to envision this torso getting filled out. I've marked the bottom of the chest here. See the top of the collarbones, and you can see I've added some plates to just kind of bulk it out. As you can see, humans are quite thick, especially men, muscular men that is, are very thick. So you can sort of see it needs that depth. So that's what I've done there, on top of adding those wires and rods to match the depth of the pelvis, and that gives a really good base point to then I can start adding, sort of muscular flesh, not just skeletal structure and large structure. I can start getting into the other details. So that's where we're at now. And the leg here, I actually had to cut a portion of this off. Both of these sections I measured the exact same length. However, humans, we pivot our legs about right here, right? So usually when we pivot, it moves flesh and muscle out of the way, but not the case with metal. So to simulate pivoting, I have to cut this section out because this pelvis actually has depth. So I can remove this piece and compensate with the rest of this pelvis here so that everything is still in proper proportion. What sucks is if I didn't do this, and I know from experience that if I hadn't have done that, it would look weird later and I wouldn't know what's weird about it and I wouldn't know what to do to fix it. So it's all coming from experience, watching videos, learning. Lots and lots of experience. So here we go. All right, got some progress. Forgive the poor audio quality. My microphone apparently just broke. I was talking to myself for 2 straight minutes. Anyways, the wires here are really helping. I never thought I would do this method, but it's working out really well. So what I'm doing is looking at the sculpture from one dimension, referencing my visual aid here, and I add a wire for the top of the quad, for example, bottom of the hamstring, and then that gives dimension to this plane of view. From this side, I can add muscle that way, and the calf, which will squish out due to the fact that this leg is going to be bent very aggressively. It's going to squish that muscle out, so I sort of shaped it to reflect that. This plane is really cool. Quad, hamstring, calf, all looks really good, and there's the glute. The glute is going to protrude on the right side just because I believe it's going to be more flexed because of his pose. The left side glute, for example, though, is going to be the opposite. It's going to be stretched. So it's kind of satisfying. I got to weld up to the top of the glute, pull the wire, and that tension made this perfect arch. And you can sort of envision what his leg is supposed to be. This side, got the calf all built out, and it's just kind of taking shape. These wires really add a lot of dimension, and you can sort of start to see what I'm envisioning now. So there it is. I think I'm going to stop here today, and that wire method is really cool. So I've never seen it before. I'm sure I'm not the only one to do it. I'm not the first one to do it, but no one really showed it to me. It's just kind of cool, very useful. Quick update for the evening. I made some progress on this guy, mostly the thigh and glute area. I got a little bit of the side of the torso here, the obliques, some section here of the quads, but the wire method here is working really well. And I gotta say, I'm not sponsored, but I kind of wish I was, because they know how to make a good tool. And these little bolt cutters, they're only 6-inch, but they make quick work out of this 3/32 rod, and I could just clip, bend, and get moving really fast. Before, I was using a cutoff wheel, believe it or not, instead of bolt cutters to cut every single wire, but it's making really quick work out of it. So as you can see now, I'm sort of doing this, you can kind of like think of it as 3D printing. I just kind of take every angle and add a wire where I think it should be, and later I will go in and fill these gaps in with welds, and it'll make it appear solid without any gaps at all. Maybe eventually, as I get better at this wire method, it might be a way to do a full sculpture, because it is really cool looking actually. But if I took my time and made it a little bit more refined, it might be worthy of a finished sculpture in this method. But this is the update for today. You can kind of see the glutes and legs are sort of taking shape, and they're just really getting filled out, and you're starting to really see the full body that is inside the sculpture. Ooh, look at this progress. I'm getting really tired because I've been at this for 6 straight hours. I haven't even taken a bathroom break just because I've gotten on such a good roll. I've kept going all day today. Filled out lots of areas. This calf here, not sure how I feel about it. It's hard to tell sometimes when parts are unfinished, but I feel like this calf is maybe too large. I don't know. But I mean, I measured everything and it's the same. This calf is supposed to squish and kind of protrude out. But anyway, whatever. That's one part, and everything is filling into the back here. If you look at the top-down view, see from both the reference model there and this, how the lat muscles, the latissimus dorsi, how much they protrude out the back and how thick they actually are. Started on these are the trapezius up here, the traps that connect to the neck. So that's started, and really can't wait to start on the arms, but I don't really know what to do. I think I'm gonna have to either use thinner wire, or I'm going to have to ditch this wire method and start building up the muscle on the arms, because it's just gonna be a little tough with this wire. So maybe I'll start with using 16th inch wire and build up the deltoids, biceps, triceps, and forearm muscles and see where we go from there. But the torso and the abdomen here are my most intimidating areas that I'm kind of dreading working on, as well as the chest. It's just very, very tough for me. And maybe I'll have to take this plate off or something, but I feel like it's at a good point. But here is the update for today. It's making a lot of progress, especially on the posterior end of the sculpture. There it is. Okay, I lied. One more update for the night, because I'm clearly obsessed with this thing. I can't get off my workbench, and unlike my obsession with tools, this is a little bit more productive than spending money on tools. So what I've done, second update for the day, I've transitioned the booty here, because butts do not just come straight out of the pelvis. They transition with flesh and other muscle. So there's now a nice smooth, sort of anatomically correct transition from the lower back to the top of the butt. And transition to this side, I realized that I stopped too soon with these wires because the top of the thigh is supposed to stop at the top of the hip bone, which is right there. So I kept continuing on with these wires here, so it looks a little bit more correct. I added wire to the abdomen since I am dreading it a bit. I decided that I'm going to add wire on the internal side of the rib cage just so I can start to see it and I can flesh it out. Sort of like how I've bulked up layer on top of layer of wire here for the leg, I'm going to do that here. So this is the first layer. It's probably not quite thick enough, but you can start to see, especially as I turn it, how his abdomen twists and has got that mass now to it, as well as the pelvis and groin line. I've started building that out because there is mass here. The idea is to build out the abdomen. At the very end, I will do the last little groin line to sort of seal up this leg, since the leg pinches against the groin and pelvis and creates this sort of squished effect. So I'll do one last line and wire there if I don't start building weld on top of weld. We'll see where it goes. But that's the idea with the abdomen. And last but not least, started with the arm, seeing what kind of proportions I want: bicep, tricep, forearm, and we have anterior and posterior deltoid to start getting the proportions, maybe a little bit bulkier, I don't know, but getting that 2D look first of the arm, and then you start kind of building out this section of it, and mostly it's going to be tricep down here. So that's the arm and what I've done for the remainder of the night. Okay, I'm going to bed. Well, one of the hard parts about making a sculpture like this is admitting when work that you've done previously and put a lot of time into is completely and utterly wrong, and you have to remove it. So I took more time to undo the work I already did. So it turns out that the pelvis box in here that I created, it is the right proportion, but I did not tilt it forward as pelvises are angled forward in humans. This would allow for the lower back to glute transition better, as well as this corner up here. It would be more tilted that way versus up. So this corner is sort of a problem here, and that's again due to the fact that the pelvis wasn't tilted. So I can adjust this and fix that, as well as fixing this lower portion. Luckily over here on this side of the glute and body, because he is so angled left, bunch of mass bundles up here, and I don't think it's going to be a problem because of the way his pose is. I think for now it looks pretty good. I actually need a little bit more mass right there, so that's a good sign that I'm not going to have to remove any from this side. So it's just one of those tough things that you have to admit and fix. But the things I've added are the finishing of the upper back, at least for now, unless I find that I need to add some more. But I've got a good base structure up here. If I need to add more wires on top of the wires, I can. Just added one wire here for a lower tricep portion there. I also did the sort of outline of the lower pec, so you can sort of see the chest sort of angles out, and now it has that the landmark, I guess, of the chest is laid out. More abdominal wires, and they connect to the pelvis. I also learned today that I needed more mass on the top of the quad as well as the lower part of the hamstring, so that now it has more of that pinched effect here. So you can see the two masses here of the calf and the hamstring are combined, and it looks a little more natural. And now that hamstring comes down, sweeps down a little more naturally, and added a couple more wires here for the lower glute. I think that looks a little more natural as well. So yeah, it's looking pretty darn good. Now it's really coming together. I really like the abdomen of how it's going, but the chest is really intimidating to me. It's gonna be a whole venture on its own. Probably something I'll do tomorrow or the next day and really just take a plunge into the chest, as well as fix this lower back section. I might even need to take some more right there out. It's just, there's a lot more mass there than I need, and that's because I did not tilt it. So by grinding this off, I'm essentially simulating that tilt. So hopefully I can fix that and make it look pretty okay. But here it is for the day. Well, happy Friday, everybody. Got an update again for you. Not a huge one. I think I've spent 3 hours on this today. So chalking that up to the total hours. Let's see, we got the lower back here that I've ground down the pelvis so that I could transition the lower back. It looks a little bit more correct now, so that it goes from the lower back to the upper glute. And with that improvement, I also revisited this section. It was just looking a little funky, and kind of knocked down some of the wires, redid it, and transitioned it a little bit better here from the side of the glute to the thigh. So that looks a little bit better. Knocked down this little corner here that was the corner of the hip. Because that corner was bad, this corner was also bad, so I just kind of knocked it down. Luckily there's mostly flesh up here, so I didn't have to take down a ton. So now I think this section, this whole area looks pretty darn good. There's a gap here right now just because I'm not exactly certain how to transition it with the wires. I either go down this way and that perpendicularly intersects these wires and it's going to look a little awkward, or I go this way, but that doesn't make anatomical sense because it needs to stop here. So it's almost like I need to put a wire inside there, but it's something I just don't want to visit right now, so I'll give it some thought. I bulked up this thigh as well because I kept bulking up this one. This one became a little bit disproportional, so I added wires all around now to that right leg as well, and it's just a little bit more correct, a little bit more in proportion to both legs now, and this guy is going to be quite beefy. I added a few traps, few wires for trap muscles here, and it looks really cool. And you can kind of see the difference between no trap muscles here and trap muscles here and how bulky it is. So when he's holding that bow, it's going to be tensing up the traps and the lats quite a lot. So that area needs a lot of bulk. And I really like the transition from these wires into the lat muscles. It's really kind of cool. And yeah, look at that. That is just kind of cool. So I'm going to try and keep the wire method as much as I can. I'm going to keep it the finished product if I can. One of the ideas I have is to take a finish sort of like this. I've combined some welds here, ground them down and blended them, so you can sort of see what that finish would be like. So in corners like this where I need to add welds, I can't do it with wire, I can add a weld and then grind it and blend it down. It might be kind of a cool finish. Imagine this right here all over. Might be kind of cool. So this is supposed to be like a Greek god sort of figure, so he is big, bulky, and that's the update for today. Well, just a few short days ago, I became obsessed with these Knipex bolt cutters, and I'm having to tear down part of the sculpture and using the bolt cutters to do so. And after probably 100 cuts, check this out. I'm shocked. The tip of it has broke. These things are days old. Well, minus my little setback with my tool breaking this morning, luckily I have a couple spares. They haven't failed on me yet, but anyways, I think I figured out the chest. It looks pretty cool on this side, looks pretty good. And I was racking my brain last night and today trying to figure out how to do this. So I added this plate right here because the chest would angle down and then go straight, and it's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to angle the whole way through. So I added that plate. I felt that it was okay to bulk it up a bit, and I put the plate in a position where I know the bottom of the chest is supposed to be. And what I ended up doing and what ended up fixing it was I used to have wires that followed the shape of the chest, but that's not what looks good because these wires are sort of simulating muscle fiber. So it's not very appealing to the eye to just create an outline with this wire. So what I did, and what finally made it click for me, was this wire right here. Realizing that the front of the deltoid here actually has a lot of mass and actually protrudes in front of the chest in this archer position. So putting this wire up here and sort of simulating that protruding deltoid and knowing that the muscle fibers on the chest connect to that really was the clicking point for me. And I did it on this side, so now I can sort of simulate it here, and you can see that this bow here, this muscle fiber, will allow you to add fibers from the chest and make it look exactly like a chest. Look at how cool this thing is now. So with this thing taking shape, I decided to get a little ahead of myself and make a very rough bow. I mean, seriously, it's made of 1/8" wire that I bent with my fingers with 16" wire for the strings. It's just incredibly rough, just as a placeholder. The idea with the bow is to be very grand, very detailed. I'm going to find some design to emulate, and I'm going to polish it, and every little detail will just be very refined. Same thing with the arrow, although I'm thinking maybe like brass or bronze for it. Again, though, it'll be very detailed and maybe polished, we'll see. But here it is, and that bow really just adds a lot to it, because before it's just the guy in the pose and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But now with the bow there, it makes a little bit more sense and just looks so cool. Well, you all know what time it is since I've been on a roll making this thing this week. Another update. Improved the back, the glute, the upper glute here, did a transition, so I added more, so technically the glutes are larger, but it was wrong. It needed to be transitioned a little bit better, so there's all new wires here, so it's bumped out. All new wires here as well, because this also needed bulking. The leg squishes as you bend your leg, so there's a whole new row here, whole new row of lower back. Probably doesn't look like it, you know, just because there's so much to process whenever you're looking at this, but it was very straight right here. It was very flat, so I sort of rounded the left upper glute here and transitioned that a lot better now. The arm, holy hell, this is super confusing. It looks like a mess. The anatomy of a human arm is so difficult to grasp, let alone the human anatomy in wire form. And then you add on human anatomy, wire form with a bent arm. So I'm really trying to process this, but we got deltoid, bicep, tricep, and forearm. The forearm is just my absolute nightmare. It's such a difficult muscle to understand because of twists and all of that. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of connecting the wires here to point to simulate the elbow, although I think it's too far out because I've cut these things to exact measurement and proportion of your arm. So I think by extending this even that much to create the point for the elbow, I think it's now too long. So the arm is, I mean, it's going to be a whole other adventure. It's a mess, but I hope it comes out right in the end. From, you know, when you step back, it kind of looks cool. It looks pretty all right. But I mean, look how awkward the tricep looks. I think it needs to be extended out here. So, and the transition here from the tricep, deltoid, and the lat muscles, they all sort of blend together with humans. So it's difficult. This is getting really, really tough to get into these details. Let's see what else. Down here, the joint from the hamstring and quad Joining the knee, got the knee outline done, a couple more wires around here. So now when you step back, you can kind of see that down there. It doesn't look so awkward now. You can sort of visualize that knee now. Let's see, what else did I do? Took off a couple wires over here, added a couple more to the lats. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, but there it is. Update number 112, I don't know. So the plan for today for this guy is to make him a head. Obviously a perfect sphere is not the shape of a human head. It is more oval in shape. So to create that shape, what we do is we take a sphere that is actually 1 3/4 of an inch, which is exactly the unit size that I've used to build his structure. So this is 1 unit, 1 3/4, and I'm going to cut off each side to represent and to more accurately show the side planes of a human head. So first thing to do is to grind this thing down. And of course I've got a whole abrasives drawer dedicated to abrasives. I'm going to use this one. It is ceramic. It's 36 grit, so it is really aggressive. Should make quick work of that large steel ball. Now you might be asking, well, how much do you grind off? Very fair question. I probably would have just eyeballed it in the past. But with some of these formal sculpting classes I've been taking, when they reference clay, they talk about a ball first out of clay that is 1 unit, which in my case is 1.75 inches. And when you cut this off, the circle that you create after you cut off should be about 2/3 of this diameter, which is about 1 1/8 inches. So I got this little compass tool and I've measured it to about 1 1/8 inches, and I've kind of marked out like this, equal distance, create a circle so I know how deep I can grind to create that proper sizing. So it can get kind of tricky, perfectly grinding or cutting off the opposite side, right? Imagine if I am slightly off center, then it'll be sort of lopsided and I won't have ground off the sides evenly and symmetrically. So what you do is you divide it into 4 quadrants, continue the line, okay, nice and straight. Do the same thing on this side, continue the line. Where they intersect will be the middle of that side so that they will be symmetrical. Now I can draw a circle around this as the center point and then grind from there. Okay, there, now I have the circle on the should be perfectly opposite side of that one that I'm going to grind down. Do not let this rod here that's only here for support to hold as I'm grinding. Don't let that deceive you because it's crooked, right? I just welded it on crooked relative to these 2 circles. So if you look at them both by themselves, they should be perfectly parallel. Now we got the sphere with both planes ground down to roughly even size and parallel. Broken up into quadrants as well. You got the ears, as you can imagine, over here on each of these sides. Now, this line is the brow line, so just below here is where the eyes go. Bottom of the nose connects to this line, which connects back to the bottom of this quadrant. Now, if I take this distance, which is about 3/4, and add another 3/4 from this one, so down about here, out in this realm is where the chin will go. So I'm going to weld a wire here about that length, and then I'm going to go to the left and to the right with wires for the jaw. And look, suddenly we have a rough outline of a Lumis head. So now if you kind of compare it to that mannequin there, just the overall big picture of his head, his jaw, and his face, you got the proper outline. So I cut the wire in the middle to length to the bottom of his chin, welded a perpendicular wire, and then bent back from the chin to the jaw, and then joined it with another wire. Now if the jaw is too wide, I can simply grind it down and reshape it. After I fill in all this empty space with more wires and welds, it'll be more solid and I can refine and reshape the face as I want to. And then from here, it's simply a matter of adding more wires and welds on top of those wires to start filling it in, making it appear solid. It's a bit ugly right now. Just trust the process. The more you add on top, the better, because you can always knock it down and refine and reshape after the fact. With a bit more grinding and refinement and smoothing out all the planes, the Lumis head is done. Now, my style of Lumis head is very chunky. I wouldn't call it anatomically correct. I just like this sort of mannequinized face, and I love the faceless style. So my style of Lumis head is, I don't know, I guess I'd call it like a knight's helmet. That's sort of how I see it. The last thing that I had to grind was the top surface here of the skull, just because, again, human skulls aren't perfectly domed. The back is quite domed though, so I kind of leave that, but I grind off the top and blend all the planes together, and there is the finished Lumis head. And here it is attached. This Lumis head, even though it is faceless, adds a ton of dimension and emotion. Just having the subtle nuances to how he tilts his head, which is kind of hard to tell in video, but his right jaw is sort of tilted up because he's sort of reaching the limits of how much a human can turn their head. So he's sort of desperately aiming back, and as a result, he's reaching that limit, and his jaw line in his right side here, or our left, is sort of tilting up. So he's just desperately turned back, and it just looks really cool. Obviously, a lot more flesh, a lot of muscle, a lot more substance that needs to go into this, so it still looks a little bit awkward. But that is now something I can work on, having this head for reference. So suffice it to say, this is the update for today. Thanks for following along.
I know you. I know you. So, we okay?
So I got a lot of nice compliments about the arm and the hand. Thank you all for that. But you know what? You're all wrong about that hand. So it's coming off. I'll explain why. The hand is coming off simply because I don't like it. It looks okay. Pretty cool, impressive, I guess, out of metal, but the fingers are a little bit too sausage-like for my taste, so they need to be more flat. Your fingers are a little bit more wide than they are flat. They're more oval. Okay, my fingers are gloved right now, so it's maybe not accurate, but you get the point. They're supposed to be flattened, not made out of round bar stock like I did. So I'm going to take this rod from the jewelry making episode, and I'm going to turn these into fingers. It's already flattened, and it's the same bar stock that I use for those fingers, so it's the same size. Now flattened will make the fingers wider, and I can add the finger joints on top of the flattened metal, making it a little bit more accurate. Plus, the little gap between the fingers, just not feeling that for these two fingers. There is supposed to be a gap up here, but these ones, no. When you look at your hand from multiple different planes, you can see from the wrist to the tip of the finger, it tapers. From this index to the pinky, it tapers. See how it slopes? It's not flat. So all these angles have tapering to them. So when I made this hand, you just used a flat piece of bar stock. That's fine. I can make the tapering by welding on top of itself. Thing is it kind of makes this sort of round, chubby hand. So I think by starting with an already tapered piece of metal, I'll have a better base. So we have the taper from the index to the pinky, so it slopes down, and we have the taper from the wrist to the index, and the fingers will taper the rest of the way. So that really should give me a better base, included with the different fingers that I'm going to start with. So let's find out. All right, so before I show you the new hand, let's compare and contrast this first hand. Like I said, the finger is a little bit sausage-like, don't care for that, and the gesture is a little bit weak. It's a little too gentle. It's supposed to be holding back a lot of tension for the string on the bow. The back of the hand, a little too rounded here. It's okay. The pinky looks kind of weird. Again, though, you're not gonna really see it from this position. You're not gonna see the pinky, but you know, it matters to me. So all those details add up. And now look at this from this angle, how much more aggressive those fingers are. And look at the pinky transition. It just looks like a hand from wherever you look, especially from this top-down view. Looks really good. Fingers are far more aggressive. They just have this sharp transition, and you really feel the tension in the fingers holding back the strings. So I think this is a much better hand, and I like this wrist transition too. Gives it a little bit more life. So you want to get real technical and nitpicky for a second? Check this out, the pinky's still wrong. Knuckle 1, 2, 3, 4. No, there are only 3 knuckles. So what's going on? What I need to do is add some metal right here to extend this joint. Okay, so the knuckle starts floating out here, and flatten this section. So it goes from this knuckle to right here, so a straight line, and then goes back to knuckle number 3. So it'll be 1, 2 out here, 3. This rounded section sort of makes it seem fat and puffy, so it's like a swollen finger. So I actually need to shift. If I could somehow push this metal down, which you kind of can with a TIG welder, melt it and push it down to right there and replace that metal, that would be more correct. Oh, also, struggling a bit here with the arm. It's coming in pretty nicely, looking pretty accurate. Deltoid, bicep, tricep. Still can't touch it because it is scalding hot. But look how cool it looks when you hold this section of arm up and you really get an idea of it coming together with that muscle detail and how cool it's going to be. But what I'm struggling with is knowing when enough is enough or when I need to keep moving out. So I know that this arm, at least to my measurement, is the correct proportion, but I have to bulk up the mass, the muscle, the flesh, and everything that goes into an arm. And it's hard because it's like, okay, the bicep looks good now. And then you add more, like, okay, no, now it looks good. And the same thing with every other muscle group. But look how much more arm I have to go. So I have to keep adding it out, but now that's going to make the muscle elongated, but I need it to bulge because he's bending. So now you got this section of arm, and look how cool it looks against the arm section that I'm filling out right now. And this part is getting really, really tough with building muscle on top of itself, because as you build, you're like, okay, that looks good. And then you go to hold it up and you're like, no, it's still too lean. I need to keep going out. I know that the bar underneath is to proper proportion, so I know I need to use this entire thing as if it's a bone underneath. I can't just cut off and be like, oh yeah, that's it. It needs to be cut off right there, because then you're going to get the wrong proportions. So I need to stick to that skeletal frame underneath to hold that proper proportion, but it's so hard to, move my way out because I think it already looks good. Like when I look at this section here on its own, but then when you step back and look at all of it, you're like, oh, okay, needs more work. It's a tough process. All right, update time. Really excited about this one because the arm's looking pretty darn good. I had to cut off this elbow several times just to get it right. I kept lingering on this one portion back here and ended up realizing I needed to actually cut off some length because the bend of the arm will do that. You have to take out length. But when you're just dealing with bars that were attached before, it's really hard to tell, do I cut that bar? Is this correct? Because I don't want to mess with those proportions. But when you bend it, it's like those bars cross. And so what you have to do is cut off that cross section, and then the proportions still stay the same, but you're left with a more accurate pose. And that just looks awesome from the top. These subtle nuances of the forearm muscle are just my favorite thing. And this forearm muscle is just my favorite because it's so hard to translate into a bend and get it accurate, especially out of metal. If you look here at my little anatomy tool, look what the forearm does. It sort of connects between the tricep and bicep and stretches all the way to the forearm. So knowing that bicep, tricep, it's going to connect here and it's going to sweep this way and it's going to bulk up as he bends his arm. So that gives this bulky peak up here and then a subtle taper to the elbow. Same thing underneath, subtle taper, and then a bulk for the underside as well. So it really creates that lifelike feeling just because of all those little tiny nuanced details, and I'm really proud of that. The arm is kind of sticking out a little bit. I don't know. I think it's okay, but I might have to do some adjustments. Head tilting in makes it really aggressive. Just really happy with it so far today. Okay. One more video because I just want to brag about this subtle nuance of the forearm muscle tapering to the elbow, and the elbow is even the right size. I can't explain how difficult it is out of metal. I mean, I didn't grind this to shape. I welded it to shape. I'm just so satisfied and happy with that taper. Doesn't matter what angle you look at it, it looks right. The bulge here tapers into here, which then tapers there and up top. It's just, I could gush about it all day long. I'm so proud. I'm so pleased. That just looks so cool from this low angle like this. I mean, that is a really good arm and hand, but it's just all coming together and it just looks so cool. I can't wait to see the rest of it looking like this. I hope it's as good as this arm turned out to be, but I think this arm is going to be the hardest part to make just because it's got such a harsh bend to it and the hand has so much detail to it. So I think that's one of the harder parts is this, but man, this feels great. It's such an exciting thing. The best way I can describe it is a creative high, and it's something that I chase. And to be perfectly honest, it is something that I wake up for. It is something that is, for me, worth living for. That's why I like making this stuff. I know. I said I wasn't going to touch that arm anymore, but I did, and I kind of had to, and I'm glad I did. Couple things. The arm position, the hand was a little bit too far out. It was just it was too far. It was too far from the body. It was like he was pulling the string away from his chest instead of that direction. It was more like he was pulling it that way. So I needed to bring that in for that reason. Also, the back of the arm, the upper arm here, was just a touch too long. So when I cut it off, the thickness of this blade, very thin, was exactly enough to bring the arm in and kind of shrink the upper arm so that I was able to reposition it. I was able to bulk up the lower forearm and create this really nice fold. You see here the crease between these two muscle masses. I bulked up the bicep as well. And looking at other reference photos, that bicep is quite tensed and balled up in this pose. So it looks a lot better now, in my opinion. And while I'm at it, I'll just share some progress for today. I might do some more tonight. Delts got bulked up in the front, the back, the top, a bit more, and connecting to the back muscles. It's probably not going to stay this way. That doesn't really, there's no definition that much in real anatomy. Triceps have been bulked up, which also lends to more accuracy of the transition from the back of the arm to the elbow. So that made it look a little bit better. Starting the process with the traps up here that then lead into the lats and the neck. Bulking up the chest. This is something I'm still not really happy with. Most of the muscle mass with the chest is here when in this position. So I'm gonna have to somehow remove this and redo some of the section because it's a bit too large down here, I think. The lat and chest muscle are meeting here for the armpit, and it looks really cool from this section now. So that's so far what I've done today, as well as this side of the arm. So I just got these really awesome little pocket books there for artistic reference of the human anatomy. I got several of them for different topics, and each one of them has pages and pages of human anatomy reference drawings. So looking at this one here, I can tell you why the chest is wrong. It's sort of similar to my pose here with the arms open. The lower chest needs to stretch. That's what happens when the arms get lifted. So there's just too much substance down here in the lower part of the chest, and it needs to go up top, which is correct. It is up top, but there's too much down here, so it just makes this mass seem just overly large and incorrect. So that is one of the images that will help me, along with multiple other images amongst all these pages and books. So that's kind of how I work. And so now I know I need to change this and probably remove some of this. Like this image here, this is a good one, showing the stretched pecs, as well as the, if you look past the lats on the back, and that's what creates the pit, the armpit. So the large pecs getting stretched across and the lats getting stretched as well creates the armpit. And it looks like I need to add more mass to the lat and maybe a little bit to the interior of the pec here. But otherwise, I think this looks pretty darn good. I mean, based on this reference, how that muscle sort of traverses this gap. It just kind of gaps over to the deltoid and kind of folds over the part here of the bicep. So that's looking pretty good, and that's how I use these things to know that I'm doing the right things. I don't know about everybody else, but man, I love working when it's like this outside. It's wonderfully cool, about 72 degrees and rainy. I love it. Anyways, after being away for my 4-day trip and studying some of this material, I knew that the chest was wrong, so I immediately attacked this. So now the chest, I removed a lot of material down here in these corners and made more of a subtle transition between the ribs and abdomen area. And now it's just this subtle bump, and then the muscle fibers are stretched up here. So most of the mass is going to be up near the shoulders as the chest stretches open with his arms up. Also made a change to the head. The front is ground down, a little more flat. I just prefer this style. The other more rounded style is called Lumis. This one, I guess you could kind of say, is Bridgman. Bridgman has a very notably blocky look, and I like something in between, so I suppose it's my own style between the two. Well, besides looking really cool, this is just sort of interesting, the differences between different metals. The stainless steel is all colorless, while the carbon steel becomes colored at certain temperatures. Stainless steel has less carbon in it and creates less color, but it's so fascinating to see the very distinct differences between these two metals, even on the crown of his head here. Well, this thing is still incredibly hot, but here's the end of day update. I think the neck is the big picture here today, obviously filling out a lot of the back. And let's take a turn here. Built up some of the forearm as well. It's looking a little funky though. You see this bend? That's going to take some more work. So arms don't do that. That's kind of strange, but we have substance there, so I can play around with it and adjust it as needed. And that is just looking really cool. Every day it's just looking better. The neck, again, like I said, is the highlight for today. That looks so damn cool. I'm very proud of the twisting of the neck, the muscles in there, and just the overall strain and the accuracy I think I captured. From this angle in the back, I love how the neck looks. You can really get a sense of that tension and the twisting action that's going on. You have to add metal underneath his chin for flesh and sort of sweep it around to the front here because it's always connected, right? So that flesh is twisting, and so are the muscles, so that creates that tension. Really proud of how that came out. A lot of updates, or progress I should say, on the chest. Thinned it out a bit. It still feels a little bit too wide, but I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with it overall, even if it stayed like this forever. The abdomen, filling that out, and see from the back side here, the obliques here, kind of getting filled out as well. Touched a bit on the glutes, on the left leg, that's getting filled out. But overall, it's looking real good. Really happy with the neck, and it's just looking awesome. I really want to tackle this arm today. It's just irking me. So comparing these two, this one, let's see if I can get them both. Here we go. You can kind of see this one's a little bit bigger compared to this. Granted, this one is stretched out, but I do need to add a little more bulk here and the joining part here to the lat. So maybe a little more here and a little more down here. The elbow actually needs to get knocked down because when your arm is straight, the elbow sort of goes in right here and then the muscle pops out. This is what's causing this to sort of look like it's slightly bent. I need to also knock down a little bit of the bicep. The bicep is supposed to taper, whereas right now it's kind of going straight right here. So I want it to taper just slightly down here. And I need to bulk up the forearm here and in the back. And I'm hoping to make the hand today as well. I already got started on it. So let's see how this goes. Oh, the other thing that I hate to admit that I might have to fix is the neck. As much as I love it, there's strain, there's tension. It seems accurate, but it's not. There is a muscle that connects from the back corner of the head right here, and it connects down here, okay? And I've made a muscle here. That's not necessarily wrong because there are muscle fibers in here that connect to the traps. However, this muscle from the top of the head down here should go straight when his head is twisted. And it kind of does this little dip thing to connect to the trachea. So technically I should weld a mass of metal right here and straight down and bulk it up and create the tension there, and then the muscle sort of smooths out back this way toward the trap. I like how it looks now, but man, I don't know. I might need to change it. We'll see how I feel. We'll see what I do. Quite a lot of work done today after 7 straight hours without a break. I thought I was going to do some more welding today after I had dinner, but I'm not feeling it. Just too tired. It's just taking too much mental focus. But look at that arm. That looks really damn good. Love the subtle change between the bicep and the forearm and that little crease that is naturally here. That change over from the bicep to the forearm muscle looks really good. There was too much mass right here, so I removed it and sort of tapered it to where the forearm starts in the back of the bicep here and kind of twists around the arm. So from this angle, it looks really good. Other angles, not so much. The wrist needs to get improved. It is really narrow. The hand position is wrong, and I feel very about the hand. So I might just end up redoing the hand, even though I spent a great deal of time on it today, but it is what it is. If I'm not happy with it, I will redo it. So probably gonna end up doing that. From the back angle here, I really like the arm. I think it looks pretty good. Tricep got bulked up a bit. Lat transition is a little bit better, but check this out. Looks a little weird from this angle. I feel like up here is wrong. Not really sure what it is. Maybe I need more mass on the underside of the tricep. It just looks kind of funky, but from other angles, it looks really good. So I got to figure out what's wrong there. Added more mass to the back, filled it in, and these 2 large muscles are getting started. I'm starting building these up, so there will be a lot more mass here, and that gives it a lot more life and form. The glutes are being filled in, and I think they're coming along nicely. All sorts of jokes I could probably make there, but I'm not going to. See, we got rib cage mass. Since he is lifting his arm in such a dramatic pose, the rib cage will be sort of exposed, so you can kind of see from this angle the shape of the rib cage is here. And as I turn it, yeah, you can kind of see the rib cage there, maybe a little more mass because you want to differentiate between the rib cage, then to the obliques and the waistline and the abdomen. So that's something I've been working on. Got some rib mass here as well under the armpit here, and then the rib, as you imagine, kind of goes back into the waistline here. And of course the neck. Even though I didn't want to do it, I knew I needed to. This sternocleidomastoid muscle really needed a lot of bulking up. As you move the camera around, you can really get a sense of those transition lines between all those muscles and the trachea and all that flesh. It looks really good. I think it looks better now than it did before, gratefully, because I was afraid to ruin it. But this muscle that I had there before still applies. It's still necessary. I did add more traps because before, at this angle, you wouldn't be able to see the traps from up front here, but now I added it so that you can, because they are wildly activated and tensed up in this pose. So it has this really cool transition between deltoid, trap, deltoid, super wavy, and it's looking really good. Back up here talking about this hand, this is too long. The palm is just too long, so I'm gonna need to cut it off right here, move it back, while also fixing the wrist and the forearm. But this arrow is really cool, very small, and I love the detail and the style, so I'll probably do that exact style when I finish this, but that is just a rough placeholder arrow. It'll be much more refined and I'll take more time on it. I just whipped it together as a placeholder, like I said, so it's looking really cool. It just keeps developing and keeps looking better every day. I love how this arm is looking. Still need a little bit more improvement, but you're starting to see the big picture and what I'm imagining. Let's do a quick update video for everybody, since I did some work on this yesterday but didn't make an update video. Leg started getting filled in. Made the framework for a foot. It looks like a sock, so don't bash me for it quite yet, because it will get better. But putting these wings on, again, these are like the wings that I made, I don't know, 6 years ago. They're just a bit too large. I feel like they impede it a little bit too much. It's just a little, yeah, they're just too large. So I'm going to end up remaking these wings and making them probably half their size, so that they don't take up much space, because yeah, they just seem out of place right now. Moving over here to the right side of the right glute, I added a lot of material up top here on the top of the glute. Filled this section in here as well. Started filling in between the glutes because I don't think that they're going to be separated. I think I'm going to end up having them joined, almost like he's wearing like a bodysuit or something, just less distracting. Lower back muscles are getting filled in as well, so there's more mass there. It's looking a whole lot better instead of just being flat and having a flat back. Let's see, this arm has gotten a lot of improvement, though still not exactly where I want it to be. The hand, I think what I'm going to end up doing with this hand is just keeping the palm on. So I'm going to cut the fingers off, I'm going to attach the bow, and I'm going to weld mass on top of the bow to represent the fingers. So instead of doing individual little fingers like this, I'm just going to weld a mass on for a fist. From this angle of the arm, I don't know, there's something weird going on. I think right here in this section, it almost makes it look like the arm is going this direction and then bending down now. It could be the deception from the new placement I did in this arm, because it's kind of got this upslope for the thumb. Maybe that's the issue there, but maybe I need to add some more mass here. Don't know yet, got to play around with it, but still looks pretty good. Took off a lot of mass off of the forearm here, redid the elbow, and I think I'm gonna have to redo it yet again. I think the elbow needs to go back here versus here, so that's gonna have to get redone again. And now that I started filling this leg out, I know what I'm gonna have to end up doing to finish the leg. I'm going to have to cut it off at some point. I simply cannot weld inside here in the pelvis area here, and where the leg meets the rest of the body, there needs to be more mass here. That's why it's all empty right here. So I will have to fill this out, make a large cut, and cut the entire leg off right there, finish the leg, finish the pelvis, and then reattach it in some way, obviously with welding, but there are different methods I can do to make it seem more seamless. So that will be the next big thing, I think, is filling out this leg, getting this foot refined, and making it look more accurate and less like a sock. But I'm going for a very dramatic, pointed toe look. So I think it's going to be really cool. Now for this foot, eventually when I get to it, there's a couple different things I can do. I can have him, very aggressively, pointed toe, where he's just barely, almost like he's launching off of the surface. And I kind of thought like a big ball, and he could be like launching off of that ball. That might be kind of cool. Or I'm going to have this whole sculpture somehow floating, and his back foot here will also be pointed, and he'll be attached by a large rod behind his leg or something that makes him appear sort of levitating. And from most angles, you wouldn't really see the rod. Of course, from like the backside you would, but for the most part, it would look like he's up and floating up in the air. So a couple different options for that. We'll see what I do with it, but wanted to fill everyone in on the plan and this update. I'm heading out on a 3-day trip. I won't be back for 3 days, and then come back for 1 day off, and then I'm gone for another 4 days. So it's going to be a busy week. Well, happy Memorial Day evening to everybody. I landed at 5 p.m., got home around 5:30, and I've been working on this thing ever since. Back home from my 3-day trip, and I studied my books during the trip, and I wanted to attack this thing. So I did quite a bit in just 4 hours or so. Changed the arm here, moved the bicep back. It was just a touch too long. So that has now been fixed. Then around to the back side of this arm, elbow shifted up. It was about right there. Now it's back here. It looks a whole lot better, especially from the front and down. You can kind of get a peek of the elbow from this angle now. And the elbow is supposed to be more down. It was aimed more back that way. Now it needs to be, or now it is more down that way. So that is a large improvement. I think the hand is still an ugly, atrocious mess, but I'll get to that. Let's see. The back, a lot on the back. Filled in a lot here, just added more mass. And then that just looks more filled in now from that angle. Lower back, again, more mass. And studying those books, I knew I needed mass here up to those 2 middle muscles. So from the muscle, they kind of round out the lower back and they fill it out. Before it was just missing mass. The glutes, getting there. They're making a huge improvement. Let's see, the hamstrings and this leg, actually this whole lower leg here is all filled out. So now that it's filled out, I can start adding mass, because I'm just really amazed by how the wires are deceiving. When I put these wires on, it seems like, okay, that's enough mass. That's the top right there. But after I start filling it in, it's like, wait, that actually made me realize that some of these muscles and these limbs are too thin, relatively speaking. So I have to bulk it up. But now that this mass is filled out, I can start bulking that up and making those subtle details, like the side of the glute here, how it kind of dips in. So I'm able to do that once it's filled out. This leg is making a lot of progress. Check out the foot. That is a lot better. So I just kind of ground it down, swept the toe forward, and it's just better. It's way more accurate, I think. Still some work to be done, but it's certainly showing its base shape here. And I think the size is correct. When I measure this thing, let's see. It is from heel to toe, let's just call it an even 2 inches. And it's supposed to span the entire face up to the top of the head. So maybe a touch small on the length of the foot, but that's pretty darn close. It's supposed to cover the entire face and go past the top of the head, whereas the hand simply covers the whole face, which would be from here to about the top of the forehead there. The abdomen also is starting to get more mass. Again, once I rip this leg off, you can see this side is clearly not done. Oh, I also did the knee, so it kind of really gives, you know, refinement and finish to the overall shape and form. The leg up here, I'm gonna have to change and refine, as well as the calf down there, and figure out how they're gonna join. Probably what I'm gonna end up doing is cutting it off here, rounding out the muscle mass, grinding the upper leg here, and then plugging it back in so that there is a nice distinct crease without having to weld it. But this side of the leg, I think, I mean, I'll start filling this in as much as I can, but eventually once it's one big clump, I'll just cut it off back here, and then I'll take it all away, finish it, and also make the remainder part of the groin and the pelvis, and finish that off, and then do the same thing like I mentioned from these two portions of leg. I'll do the same thing here where I finish this section of the body and the leg, and then join it together to make it look like a crease. So, I mean, look at this. That is so cool. It's really, really, really coming together. So once I start filling out the rest of the masses, I can start refining and working on the details, that hand, and I can move on to the bow and the wings for the heels. Super, super excited. I'm hoping to have it done pretty soon. Yeah, this is how the sculpture currently is, with a missing leg, but check it out. This is why I did it. Look at the access I have to getting into these details. So, abs, like I mentioned, I don't really want these superly developed, overly dramatic abs. I just want it just enough to where they're sort of visually looking like abs, and there is some definition there. Not horribly accurate, but it's exactly what I want. Actually, check out this this little pinhole right here. That was kind of an accident. That's right where the belly button is, and it kind of works. It was more or less of an accident. I just sort of lingered the arc of the welder there, and when I let it go, there's this little dimple left there, and that's exactly where the belly button is anyways. So, I don't know, probably leave that there. It looks pretty cool. When doing some of these details, like these serratus muscles here, I just add a layer of metal, you know, in these sections, and then I can vary where the arc is. Some things that welders don't really talk about because they don't do it, because they don't need to, is varying the distance away from the metal surface and like changing the arc. I can adjust how the arc affects the surface of the metal by how close or how far away I allow the tip of the tungsten to be. So the abs, for example, I lingered the arc pretty close to the surface of the metal, and I allowed the metal to pool up and get really hot, and then push it, and then move down, add some metal, let it pool up, and push it. And adjusting my time, my amps, my distance away from the metal allows me to manipulate it in all sorts of ways. I can add texture like this by just sweeping the arc across on different directions, or I can make it messy by allowing the arc to linger and the metal to really liquefy before I pull the arc away and move the metal. Obviously, since I removed it off this metal plate here, that's been my base plate and sort of my stable base for welding this thing and for manipulating around, I've had to put it in the vise here so that I have a surface in which to hold it and manipulate everything as I need it. But right now it's in there because everything is really, really hot. The legs, I realized, needed a lot of bulking. So the knee is starting to take shape, not totally finished yet. Some of these external and internal leg muscles are getting developed and bulking up, and that actually allows the glutes to look a little bit more accurate too, because before the glutes looked kind of large, but they weren't. They were accurately sized. The leg was simply too small, and that caused the glutes to look in proportion or inaccurate. Now, for this leg that everyone was so shocked that I cut off, yes, I can cut metal off without an issue. I can re-weld it back on. Believe it or not, I created the structure, so it's not too hard to put this back seamlessly. Although I get it, you know, when you're not familiar with this material, it seems a little scary. All that work went into this leg, and to see it cut off is kind of shocking to most people, but I have the utmost confidence that I will reattach this thing better than it was when I removed it. So besides being able to gain access to the inner thigh here and bulking that up, I've also made some small adjustments to the heel of the foot. It was a little bit too wide this way, so I ground that down and welded on some more subtle details to the foot. I think maybe the ankle and the shin here might need a little bit of bulking or adjusting, but we'll see. Overall, I think this leg is kind of done. I'll make some subtle adjustments here, either grind it to shape so that when the this section of the leg and this section of the pelvis are joined, when you look at it, you won't be able to really see much inside there. It'll just look like flesh is creasing and squishing against flesh. A couple other small details that I did today. I bulked up the obliques right here since he is bending down and sort of leaning toward his left side. That squishes this mass here, so I kind of bulk that up and it looks really good. I'm really happy with how that's looking. Added some more flesh and mass to the lats here on both sides actually, as well as the serratus like I mentioned before. But that is looking a whole lot better. It's just a bit too thin before, but man, that's looking good now. So there it is, update for today. I won't be back until June 1st. I am again going out on a 4-day trip. I will be going to Fort Lauderdale tonight. When I come back, I have a stand for this freaking book that will attach to my bench right here, and it will open the book for me, and I can get it off this because I am burning this book. I'm getting it dirty beyond belief, so it'll be a welcome thing to come home to once I get back. Well, I'm home and a little bit later than I had hoped, but I'll be able to get back to working on this for the next couple days or so. And over the trip, studying some more, I realized the abdominals and the lower abs and stomach area actually need more mass. It's very flat. And just because he's got definition doesn't mean it needs to be flat. There needs to be more bulked out mass to this. There's a stomach there, and it has organs and all sorts of substance, and then the muscles go on top. And if there was fat, they would go on top of that. So it's not supposed to be completely and utterly flat. So this section down here needs more mass below the belly button and up top, and maybe some more over here because it's, you know, it's squished and it's stretched on his right side and this left side. So it needs a little bit more play here. And check out my new little book stand. Man, that's going to be a very welcome addition. It doesn't really take up space on my bench at all. You know, it's just kind of clamped to the edge. So I saw one that was sitting on top of the bench, and I was like, oh, that's fine. I don't really use that corner. But as soon as I saw the one that clamps the edge of the bench, I'm like, yes, I need that, because I just love shoving things to the back of the corner. And that will be a very welcome tool to use, so I can weld and look back, and it's just a much quicker way of referencing instead of sitting it here on top of other hot metal and tools and then putting the tools on there to keep the book open. That is very useful for my purposes. So excited to work on this tomorrow. All right, let's do a quick progress through the day update. So check out the abs. There's more substance here. What I'm trying to do is mimic the lower abdominal area here, which I guess is called the oponeurosis, the external obliques, this lower abdominal area, giving that bit of a bump. So I've raised all of the abdominals, especially down here, this lower section. So that is bumped up quite a bit, and video is hard to show because it's just kind of a flat, you know, video is very flat. It flattens things. Whereas in real life, like, you can really see the depth that this adds now. So still kind of flat, but I want it to kind of bump out and protrude. But of course his pose is stretched. So there's a couple things going on. This side is stretching and pulling the mass, and this side is sort of pinching and squishing the mass. So I've built up more of the external obliques here and a little bit of the rib. So the rib kind of comes down and squishes, and then the obliques go up and squish. So you kind of got this kind of mass bulge here. So that's coming along pretty nicely. I think there's just a lot more development there, and it just looks a whole lot more accurate. The other thing I've been working on while doing the front abdominals here is this leg. So I kind of welded on top of itself and kind of made this little protruding corner. And what that'll do is once I reattach it, we'll create, if you can tell, let's see if I can get this here right there, this nice crease. See that crease right there? And instead of welding it, making it solid, that crease makes it just all that more detailed and accurate. So I'll weld from the side there and rejoin that cut, and I will fill in the lower glutes there, and it'll leave that really nice crease that looks very anatomically correct. So my next task, I think I'm going to do some more cuts. I'm going to cut off the upper leg from the lower leg, the calf here, because I need to get in here and develop and finish the rest of these two parts. I could weld on top of itself and finish it here, but it's going to leave a solid seam. I don't want that. Human anatomy, when we bend our joints, we have creases, right? We have folds. So in order to emulate those folds, I'm going to cut it off, finish the calf, finish the hamstring, and plug it back in together, just like I'm going to do with this. So it'll have that nice crease there, so I don't have to create a weld there. It is already finished. So I will finish these two parts and rejoin them together, probably at the knee, because the knee is seamless and smooth. And then they'll just plug in nicely together. All right, update number 2 and the final one for today on the sculpture. Let's talk about the leg first. The creases here aren't perfect. There's a little bit of light gap in there. I might fix it later, but for now, it looks pretty good. I'm really happy with it, because at any other angle, you can't see the light, and that crease just looks really anatomically correct. Straight on at the knee here looks really good. I'm really happy with that. You got these subtle creases here from these two masses. Look at that. It's like they're actually pushing on each other. And it's really cool because it's only done by welding. There's no grinding that I used to shape it. The only grinding I did was to actually cut off these two parts of the leg. And my favorite part about the leg is the way it joins. Just like I said, I'm just going to make it click in, and they're just setting on top of each other, those two parts, and it looks very natural. You see that nice crease that flesh has when it folds over itself. So I think that works really well. And then obviously the welds all the way around here are the thing that actually join it. And look, that cut line completely gone. There's nothing to fear. It's just like clay. If you can cut a piece of clay and rejoin it seamlessly and never know that it was ever cut, you can do the same thing with metal. With the right tools, it is exactly like clay. Obviously, I already talked about the abdominals, and especially this lower section here needed a lot of bulking. So it's got much needed mass there. And the abs, like, I just kept adding metal on top of metal. There's actually a lot more mass here. It's a whole lot less flat. You can just see these waves in the abdominals now, just these sort of natural looking masses that are perfectly imperfect, right? Just like a human body actually is. So that is looking really good. I'm really happy that I added that mass and that I didn't leave it flat, even though I was pretty happy with it before. It was okay. It just needed a little more work. This leg is getting a lot of mass on both sides. Moved some mass up here because there was just some missing there. Worked on the knee quite a bit. It's coming along, still needs some more work. Actually added more mass to the back glute. It was just, the main mass was just kind of too low, making it look sort of flat. So I added a little bit of mass up top here, and it's just looking just about finished. I did end up cutting the fingers off because I know I'm gonna redo this hand anyways. The bow is attached just for perspective. I'll probably break it off again as I redo this hand. The plan for the hand is to do what I've been doing with the rest of the masses, is add welds on top of welds to create the fingers, because as we grip things, your fingers sort of just blend into themselves. I don't have the skill or the tools or anything really to properly get individual fingers at this scale. So I think I'm just going to weld on top of itself and do it just like I've been doing all the muscles. I'll do it with the fingers as well, but I will do an individual thumb. So I will make an individual thumb that goes right over the top of this bow, and it'll sort of distract and hide from the lack of detail in the hand, I think. I think overall it'll look a lot better. I think this arm is actually a little too short, so I also need to cut this hand off, and when I fix the hand, I'll extend it just a couple mils. Well, to say that I'm relieved that this fist and bow in the hand is done is a bit of an understatement. This was difficult. It is not perfect, but it looks pretty darn good. Again, I just did mass buildup of welds to create the fingers and just a, balled up fist of mass. But I did do the thumb a little more accurately. So that thumb is an individual piece of metal instead of buildup welds, and it rests pretty nicely on the index finger, and the arrow will sit on top of it, resting against the bow. So the complication with this is a few different things. The fact of getting the fist the right shape, the right size, and I also had to extend the wrist about an eighth of an inch. The other thing is when I made the bow, okay, I made it so it's perfectly bent evenly on both sides, and to get it positioned inside the fist to line up, okay, with the string to go back from both ends of the bow to the finger, perfectly lining up without having to bend around his head or twist or anything like that, that was really difficult. So, and I got it just right. From this angle, it's not exactly dead on accurate. So, if you're holding a bow, your hand kind of does this and back, and it's holding a lot of pressure. So instead of your hand going forward like his is like this, it sort of is supposed to go back. So I would call that an inaccuracy, but I spent so much time on this thing. I'm honestly happy with it. It looks really good from pretty much every angle. And I think that subtle nuance difference in the hand it'll be okay. I'm gonna leave it. It was really difficult to get that bow positioned properly with his backhand too. The other thing that I've done today is retexturized his head, got it really, really hot, did welds across the top of it so that he's all blended in now. So his head looks like part of his body as opposed to a separate piece because of the way the finish was. And I was just about ready to start cleaning up the bow. The original idea was to polish this thing up really bright. I think I like this, sort of half polished satiny finish. I think it's perfectly fine and clean, and it separates itself from the body enough. And I was going to clean up this heat discoloration, but I actually think I'm going to leave it. If you look at these type of bows, they have, strings wrapped around or leather or something that differentiate the hand section where you grasp the bow, and it differentiates from the rest of the bow. And so I think that heat discoloration sort of adds to that separation. So I'm actually going to leave it like that. I think it looks pretty cool. So now I got to move on to his remainder foot, and I can also make smaller wings for the heels. I'm also gonna fix this because it is driving me crazy. I'm stopping here for today, but I did fix the leg like I mentioned. It's not totally perfect in this corner of the hamstring, but now there's no more light coming through the majority of it, and it just looks a whole lot better, I think. Just less light coming through and looks a lot more natural, even though it was good before, I think it's better now. So I think I'll take that and be happy with that improvement. As far as the arrowheads go, the reason why I think I'm favoring the traditional Greek style is just because that arrowhead has more of a presence. Now, I could simply make the arrowhead larger if I go with this pointed style here, which it seems like so far everyone's favoring. And I did remake it to a larger arrowhead. Check that out. And it's even got feathers. Looks really cool, has more of a presence. But again, even though it's larger than the traditional Greek style, I still think I favor the traditional Greek. I don't know if I feel like it's more accurate or if simply the shape of it, this sort of teardrop shape, has maybe more of a presence. Maybe that's why the shape has more presence. I think it kind of matches the actual bow, like the curves of the bow and the arrowhead has curves versus this very sharp barb here. I don't know that it matches, but looks cool either way. We'll see what I decide. I'm not really sure. I might go against everyone's votes as everyone seems to be favoring this pointed style. So we'll see what I do, but that bow, that hand, looking real good. Very happy with it. We're coming to the end of everything. So I'm finally getting around to making the wings for my sculpture, the winged sandals that I'll be making. And I'm having to hammer every little 3/32 inch wire to flatten it out to start making every individual feather. And I gotta tell you, I have a huge appreciation for any blacksmiths and anyone that does forging. My hand, my shoulders, everything are cramping in about a dozen of these feathers. Granted, I am cold forging, which, as I understand, simply means that I don't add heat to the metal, but it's small metal and it's pretty effective, but it's still a lot of work.